Have you ever wanted to visit Australia and dive on the Great Barrier Reef? For so long, this was my biggest dream, and it came true. But not only did I visit Australia and dive on the Great Barrier Reef, I also joined a marine conservation organisation on what was my second internship abroad. In this video, I will share how I got this once-in-a-lifetime internship, as well as all the opportunities I was given and the ups and downs that I had along the way. If we haven't met before, then hi, my name's Maddie and my channel is all about travel, our oceans and sustainability. So if these are things that you're into, then please subscribe to help me make more videos like this for you. This is going to be a big, juicy video, so I want to try and give you every single detail I can about this experience, what it's like to travel on the other side of the world, not really knowing how you got yourself into some situations, and also explaining how experiences like this abroad can literally reshape your entire way of thinking. I also hope to give you some inspiration on the types of volunteer opportunities and organisations that are out there to inspire you to go and volunteer or take an internship abroad just like I did. So let's start from the beginning. I was 21 at the time. I had just finished my film and media degree at the university and I was working part-time at the fashion retailer Matalan. I was trying to grab all the working hours that I could to try and save up and figure out what I wanted to do next with my life. One night I was scrolling through Facebook and I found an advert from STA Travel, who are a travel agent that focus on student travel and also working abroad. I don't think they're around anymore, unfortunately. But the advert was promoting a competition to become an intern for 6 weeks at an organisation called Citizens of the Great Barrier Reef. For ease, for the rest of this video, I'm just going to refer to them as citizens rather than Citizens of the Great Barrier Reef because it's a bit of a mouthful. Citizens are a non-government organisation that are uniting volunteers, travellers, scientists and other organisations to come together and help protect the Great Barrier Reef. Their mission is to make every citizen a conservationist to help protect the reef from wherever you are in the world. I will talk more in depth about Citizens and what they do in another video because there's quite a lot to cover. So I was flicking through, finding this advert on Facebook and I was watching it thinking, this is too good to be true, but I'll apply anyway. From what I could remember, the application wasn't like a competition. It was more like how I applied for my first internship in Samos a while ago. I did a video on that internship too, so you can go check that out afterwards if you want. I had to fill a form out and also film a video of myself explaining why I would be the perfect intern for this opportunity. It was kind of like a more extensive job application. I worked so hard on this video and I managed to get shortlisted for a Skype interview with the coordinator of this project at Citizens. We had a great chat and I was like an excited puppy going on about how I've literally wanted this moment my entire life. And against all odds, I was chosen out of 840 applicants for this internship. I'm still smiling now because that is just like so amazing and it's such a pinch me moment. I can't believe I actually got it. The woman at STA Travel phoned me one morning and I was in my bedroom and my mum was just stood in the doorway kind of like knowing who this was on the phone, and when she told me I just put the phone down and I just burst into tears, and so did my mum. So that's the surreal experience of how I actually landed the internship. And the only problem was I was with Kyle at that time still and he wanted to come too. So originally of course I was going to go on my own for 6 weeks, but with a little back and forth with STA Travel sorting out my flights and accommodation, I asked them if Kyle could come with me and they were like, yeah sure, but you might have to find somewhere else other than a hostel because they were only paying for one bed in a hostel for the 6 weeks that I was going to be there for. So we ended up finding an Airbnb to live in while we were there. Oh, and our friend Steve, who Kyle met by playing online games with, also came along too. We'd actually only met him in person twice by this point, but he wanted to come travelling with us too. Shortly after that, we quit our jobs, we signed up for our working holiday visas, and before you know it, we were on a flight over to Cairns in Australia. I won't go into too much detail about the travel because it was slightly traumatic. The day before our flight, I broke my phone, so I didn't actually have a phone to go with. We almost missed our train to London because we were flying from Heathrow rather than from Manchester Airport. But we met up with Steve in London because he's from down south, so it wasn't that bad, it just added a lot of time onto our travel. And the worst part was that we spent 27 hours travelling with our flights and layovers. Kyle was still terrified at flying at this point, so he literally tried to stay up all night before the first flight, and he didn't manage to sleep the entire time we were travelling. Oh, and just to mention, we landed at 8:30 in the morning, so we tried to stay up all day, failed, had a nap at 2 p.m, then woke up at like 4 in the morning, and yeah, that was our sleeping patterns wrecked for an entire week we were there. And you can definitely tell that we never travelled that long before in our lives. But luckily we had a few days before my internship started, so we got to explore the town of Cairns, get our sleeping patterns sorted and get familiar with the area, get some shopping done and just enjoy relaxing for a few days. My first day on the internship was so surreal. I met Andy Ridley, who's the CEO of Citizens of the Great Barrier Reef, and I also met Sam Meaden, who was the brains behind all the technical stuff at Citizens, and he was also helping me settle in, since the woman that was actually planning my internship and was going to coach me through the whole experience had actually left before I actually arrived. Andy is also the co-founder of Earth Hour, which is a worldwide movement with WWF. So I knew that I was going to be working with some really important, influential people in this industry. So the purpose of my internship was to learn as much as I could about the Great Barrier Reef and what's being done to help protect it. So then I could share my experiences across social media on Citizens and STA Travel's pages. And this was also for STA Travel to promote Australian tourism and working abroad as well. I'd been given a spreadsheet, a literal spreadsheet of all the things that were planned for me on this internship, and there was so much on the list. I'm just thinking back to it now, it was so wild the things that I got to do on this internship, it was crazy. So first up on my list was learning how to scuba dive, which has been on the top of my bucket list since I was about a toddler. I tried learning while I was like 13 or 14 in the UK, but I was really put off by like the cold water diving, so I didn't end up actually going through with it. But this time I was learning with Paddy, and obviously Australia's water is a lot warmer than the UK. I spent most of the week learning my scuba basics at a dive centre in Cairns called Divers Den, and qualified my course during a 2-day liveaboard trip on the Great Barrier Reef. I became a Paddy open water scuba diver on the one and only Great Barrier Reef. Come on! As soon as I learnt how to dive, it was literally full speed ahead with everything else that I had on my itinerary. My internship was spent with conservation organisations, marine scientists and volunteers, where I documented my journey and my experiences through film and on Instagram. I was invited to stay at the Fitzroy Island Resort, which is found on Fitzroy Island, just off the coast of Cairns. I spent 2 days there learning about their turtle rehabilitation and coral restoration initiatives, as well as exploring the island, going kayaking and snorkeling on the reef. I returned to Fitzroy Island a few times, and one of the times was with an organisation called Reef Australia. Reef is a global non-profit organisation that enables volunteers to conduct citizen science to help protect coral reefs in over 40 countries. I spent the day with them as they were conducting their yearly reef health survey on Fitzroy Island. I learnt from the students and volunteers how to conduct reef health surveys and collect the data. I then travelled down south to Townsville, where I stayed in a hostel for a week. It was my first time in a hostel and it was actually really nice. I shared a room with about 4 to 5 people. I spent time with several organisations during this week. The Great Barrier Reef Aquarium, but also known as Reef HQ, was where I spent 2 of these days. I took a tour of the aquarium and visited their turtle research and rehabilitation lab. They showed me some of their research as well as some plastic samples that was recovered from a turtle, which caused it to have buoyancy problems, and unfortunately it led to the turtle's death. It was really sad, but it was an eye-opening experience to see all the research that's being done around this topic. I also met up with volunteers that were part of an organisation called Reef Ecologic. It was one of their regular meetings at the aquarium, so I joined in and I met some lovely people. From there I went to spend a day with Nathan Cook, an applied marine scientist at Reef Ecologic, where we visited Magnetic Island, which is off the coast of Townsville, for one of their reef restoration projects. This project focused on the removal of macroalgae, which competes with coral space on the seafloor. If macroalgae overgrows, juvenile corals struggle to recruit and make new reefs. So the day was spent trying to find their quadrants that they'd placed previously, and we unfortunately couldn't find them because the macroalgae had overgrown that much. So that was an experience to learn that science doesn't always go to plan. Another day was spent in Townsville with a guy called Warren, who was a volunteer COTS diver for Adrenaline Dive, who were a dive operator in Townsville. If you don't know what COTS stands for, it stands for Crown of Thorns starfish, which look like this. They are very destructive in large numbers and they're plaguing parts of reefs around the world. They feed on coral and can spawn up to 65 million eggs per year, which multiply fast and can wipe out entire reef colonies within weeks. Global warming has only amplified their population growth as they thrive in warm waters. To tackle this problem, they cool the starfish by injecting them one by one with vinegar. While it's a manual process, it's the most sustainable way of doing so. I did 2 dives with Warren and the Adrenaline Dive team at Lodestone Reef, where luckily we didn't find any COTS. This was great news as it was down to the progress of the volunteers like Warren, and the reef was now recovering. One of the days that I felt really lucky to have experienced while I was in Townsville was visiting the Australian Institute of Marine Science, or AIMS for short. I toured around the institute with the experts and was learning about coral spores, sponges, their blue tech team, and various uses of scientific data. I was even able to sit down with a scientist who was mapping out Australia's ancient rivers on software I'd never even heard of before, and I helped map one river that had never been documented. So that was pretty cool. And that was just 1 week in Townsville. So you think that I'm done with this internship? Absolutely not. I did so much more. I still had weeks filled with other trips and activities. Next up was 4 days out at sea with AMPTO's Targeted Crown of Thorns Starfish Control Programme team. As mentioned earlier, COTS are a real problem for certain parts of the Great Barrier Reef, and the team took us to a patch of the reef near Cardwell, a very small town in between Cairns and Townsville. AMPTO has this programme in place to help control COTS populations around the reef. We managed to get in a day of diving after the first day was just sailing out to the location. But then, in typical tropical North Queensland fashion, a cyclone had hit and we had to abandon the other days of diving. Unfortunately, these seasonal cyclones were getting more and more frequent and more powerful due to climate change. So I had to get dropped off at Cardwell on my own while the team went back out to sea for another 2 weeks while they were trying to avoid the storm and also get some more diving done. This part of the internship was quite unnerving for me as I was stuck in Cardwell for the foreseeable as the cyclone had flooded all the roads back to Cairns. So I was stuck on my own, waiting in the cafe at Cardwell. I luckily found a hotel that was free that I could stay for the next few days. So I basically had to wait until the Greyhound buses could take me back to Cairns, but they were actually not running until a week or two later. Luckily for me, I met a family who were from Cairns that had just travelled down south for an event, and they were also stranded too, but they had travelled by car. They were very kind and helpful, and they offered me a lift back to Cairns when the roads had opened. Luckily, this was, I think, on day 4 that the roads had opened again, so we made the trip back to Cairns. And it was such an eye-opener seeing the power of Mother Nature in action. Literally everywhere was still flooded. There was destruction everywhere from the cyclone. So all in all, it was like 3 or 4 days of a traumatic experience, but I look back at it and laugh at it now, but at the time it was quite scary. Oh, and I just want to mention as a side note to the cyclone story, while I was in the hotel, while I was waiting for the roads to open in Cardwell, I was watching the news about the flooding, and a town called Ingham, which was a bit further south as to where I was staying, was completely underwater, and they were reporting seeing crocodiles and bull sharks swimming through the streets. How wild is that? It's just another day in Australia, I suppose. Luckily, we got back on the weekend, so I could relax a little bit after that, but the next stop on the Monday was Cairns Aquarium. I spent the day touring the aquarium and learning from the staff the research that they were doing, and also how tourism is helping protect the Great Barrier Reef. And one of my last activities on my internship was joining Andy and the team with Sunlover Reef Cruises. We hopped on the boat with a load of other tourists that were wanting to see the Great Barrier Reef. Most of these tourists have never visited the Great Barrier Reef before, and some people didn't know a lot about it. So me and Andy and the team spent a lot of time with these tourists, educating them on how great the Great Barrier Reef is, and also the work that we're doing to help protect the reef. We were also educating people on how they could become citizen scientists by joining Citizens of the Great Barrier Reef. We did some snorkeling on some of our stops, and the reef was definitely not in a good state, but these are the reefs that people take out for tourists, so they're not damaging the more pristine reefs in the area. Most of these reefs in the Great Barrier Reef are actually protected from tourists to keep them pristine, and only scientists can really dive on these reefs. But that's the best part because we're preventing heavy tourist activity from affecting these reefs, so they're preserved for years and years to come. The Citizens team was also presented with a donation to help them with their conservation efforts, which was really nice to see. So those were some of the big activities that I was very, very lucky to take part in on my 6-week internship in Australia. Looking back on it now and remembering all the things that I did and actually speaking about the things that I did with you, I did so much and I met so many amazing people. In between all these activities, I was working in Citizens HQ, where I was editing all my videos and creating all this content to share across social media to show people like you my experiences. Now, don't get me wrong, this was an experience of a lifetime, but I did have my ups and downs during this time. I had so much self-doubt and imposter syndrome. I had no background in science, I wasn't a marine biologist, like how did I end up with these opportunities with such little experience? I was also constantly doubting my skill set as an amateur photographer, videographer and content creator. I was young and I was fresh out of uni and I really didn't have a lot of experience with these things. I also do believe that I could have done a lot more with my time there. I know it's cliche to say I wish I had what I have now back then, especially with like the age of TikTok and Instagram Reels and stuff. Back then, I don't even think Reels were a thing. And also, I wish I had a better quality phone and camera to work on. And obviously now, as I'm older, I've got a lot more experience with these things, so I wish that I had all what I have now back then. But I did do the best I could at the time with what I had and my skill set in hindsight. Meanwhile, you're probably wondering, where was Kyle and Steve throughout all my internship? It's okay, I nearly forgot to mention them too. They were just living their best lives, so they were just chilling in the Airbnb, exploring Cairns and the local area, enjoying the weather, and then when I was back for my internship in the evenings and at the weekends, we'd go and explore a little bit further. The biggest problem that we probably had was that when we went to Australia, me and Kyle couldn't drive, like we didn't have our driving licence. But luckily for us, our friends Jay and Jordan flew over to Australia for a 2-week holiday, and we hired a car together, so we got to explore a lot more places. I think I forgot to mention, we actually flew out to Australia at the end of January and I started my internship in February, which also ended in the middle of March. So after my internship ended after the 6 weeks, we did want to stay in Australia a little bit longer, so we tried to look for jobs. But because of the time of year and also because of the cyclone hitting, we were unsuccessful in doing so. There wasn't really that much around where we were. And obviously we were limited because we couldn't drive. But we did, however, have another friend, Lee, come over and we bought a van together and we travelled down the east coast of Australia for 5 weeks before flying back to the UK in July. So we did manage to see a little bit more and spend more time there. I might make another video on our Australian travels and road trip. Unfortunately, I wasn't as snap happy with my camera and filming everything as I am now, so I don't have that much footage, unfortunately. I'm still kicking myself about that, but I suppose it's another excuse to go back and film it all again. So comment below road trip if you're interested in watching a video like this. Reflecting back on this experience, it's actually taken me years, yes years, to process all the experiences and the opportunities that I've actually had on this internship and how I can use my experiences and connections to potentially grow my interest in marine conservation and develop my future career. Looking back on it now, it's one of the main reasons that I wanted to start this YouTube channel, even though it's been like 5-6 years of procrastination. But we're here now, better late than never. But you know what, I've got to admit that, life does get in the way, and I was young at the time, I didn't have much experience, I was fresh out of uni, and I didn't have a job when I came back as well. I was unemployed for 6 months. So starting a YouTube channel was really not a priority for me all those years ago. Okay, so to sum all of that waffling and storytelling, I want to let you know that an experience with volunteering or as an intern, no matter how small and no matter how little experience you have, can literally change the trajectory of how you think and you approach the next stages of your life. It can also affect your career and your life goals. I will forever be grateful for Citizens of the Great Barrier Reef, as well as STA Travel and all the other amazing organisations and people that I met along the way on this internship. If it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't have continued to pursue a career or an interest in marine conservation as deeply as I am doing now. Like I mentioned before, I want to do an entire video on Citizens of the Great Barrier Reef and the amazing work that they're doing. They've grown a lot as an organisation since I was an intern with them, so it'd be really good to give you a lot more information on the work that they're doing to protect the reef and also how you can get involved with citizen science. Also, let me know if you'd like me to do a video on how you can land these experiences, volunteering opportunities and internships with little or no experience. And I just want to mention quickly as well, just because daylight is literally leaving my room, I literally found this opportunity online while just scrolling on Facebook, and I nearly didn't apply because I thought it was too good to be true, but just looking for things like that, applying to them, even if you think that you might not get them, you'll be surprised that one day, you might actually get picked to do these sorts of experiences. And a lot of internships and volunteering opportunities, while you don't have to go through like a competition process like I did to get on board with them, you can still find these online, apply if you've got the right experience, or even if you've not got experience, you can still apply and see if you get anywhere with them. And trust me, these sorts of things in your life will change you for the better. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far in the video, let me know in the comments, because this has been a long video. I've waffled a lot, but I must be good at storytelling or something if you've stuck around. Please let me know what you enjoyed and what you'd like to see in future videos, and I cannot wait to see you in the next one.